And there's this whole identity of being like a Hmong daughter-in-law, like a good Hmong daughter-in-law. There's this whole saying, right? Like everyone wants to be a good Hmong daughter-in-law. She's obedient, she cleans, she cooks, she's just wonderful to be around. She's always positive. And I knew in my gut and in my being that I was never going to be this, quote, good Hmong daughter-in-law because I wanted more for myself.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Gia Vang, a Hmong-American TV anchor based in Oakland, California. As an Emmy Award-winning journalist, Gia is the first TV anchor of Hmong descent in a major news market in the US. She's also the co-founder of the Very Asian Foundation. She joins us to talk about her experience growing up Hmong-American and the current state of play for Asian American Pacific Islanders in the US. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. Now, May is the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and with the Trump administration taking office earlier this year, its policy agenda definitely presents a completely new socioeconomic landscape for the AAPI community in the US. So today, we are bringing in Gia, an Emmy Award-winning TV journalist and the co-founder of the Very Asian Foundation, to help us understand what it all means and also getting to know more about her experience growing up as a daughter of Hmong refugees in America. So without further ado, welcome to Proudly Asian, Gia. Thank you so much for joining us from Oakland, California. Is that where you are?
Yes, Isabel, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on and excited to have this conversation. And yes, we are in gorgeous Oakland, California.
Amazing. Yeah, it is definitely a very timely conversation, and I'm just so glad to have none other than you having this conversation with us in this AAPI month. But before we get started with all that chat, and for our listeners around the world to get to know more about you, perhaps you can tell us about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up, Gia?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. I feel like I don't even know where to start. My full name is Gia. That's what my parents named me when I was born. It doesn't really have a meaning, as I was talking to my mom about it a couple months ago, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know. It just means really cute." I was like, "Oh, I just thought maybe there would be more there." She's like, "No." And so she named me Gia Vang, and I was born here in California. And my parents are both refugees from Laos. My mom from the Sayambuli area of Laos, and my dad from the Luang Prabang area, both in northern Laos. And they met at a refugee camp in Thailand called Nam Nhao. And then, as we understand, and we just passed the 50th year since the end of the Vietnam War, April 30th. My parents, because of that war and the covert wars that the U.S. was fighting both in Laos and Cambodia, Hmong people were also impacted because we fought with the Americans. And so when that war ended, it changed the trajectory of my family's history. And so my parents then resettled in first Providence, Rhode Island, and then moved here to California eventually, where I was born in the Central Valley. And then I grew up in the Central Valley, Sacramento Valley area, and eventually went to school to study journalism at Sacramento State. And got my first job in Oregon and have moved around the country since and have lived in different parts of the US and learned what it's like to be a Missourian, to be a Minnesotan, to be an Arizonan, and find my way back to California.
Wow. So growing up, you definitely navigated quite a lot of identities, and it must be, quite a journey for you to even answer. I mean, I can definitely tell why you're saying like, oh, where do you begin? Because you went through a lot of identities. So who are you really? That is probably constantly the question. But I'm just curious, like for yourself growing up in America, what was it really like growing up in a Hmong household in America? What was breakfast like for you? How was school for you?
Yeah, I think those are so it's important to know because people always ask, and now I am with a person who is not Hmong, and they're very much about like the American breakfast, and I'm like, well, what is the American breakfast to you?
That's
For
true.
us, it was so interesting growing up. My mom would just make and I should say there were 9 kids, and so my mom would just make a platter of food in the morning, and she'd make a bowl of chicken soup or something like Hmong chicken soup, or she'd make like stir fry in the morning, and she would just kind of have it there for anyone to kind of grab and eat. So we didn't really have breakfast foods. So when you think about like, oh, it's eggs and bacon and, like some American breakfast, as people would like to say, we didn't have that. We just had kind of whatever my mom decided to throw on a pot, and she would have it there for the day, and we'd eat it as we went about our day or came home from school. And my mom's whole thing, she says this growing up, that it was really important for her that we didn't have to focus on how hungry we were, because she really wanted us to focus on school. And so breakfast was not really a thing. It was kind of like grab and go. And I do tell this story sometimes. It was really fun, though, when my dad would take us to school and I would ask him to take us to McDonald's. Like my sisters and I would kind of come up with a plan to say, how can we ask Dad to take us to McDonald's today? And then we get him to take us, and he would go through the drive-thru and we'd order, our little breakfast items from McDonald's, and we would get hash browns, and my dad loved hash browns. And so it was always like, even as a high school, like sophomore, freshman, it was really fun to see my dad enjoy that food. But yeah, I don't think that we really had traditional, what people would consider American breakfast foods, but it is American to us because I am American and I grew up in this country. And so to me, that was what we ate.
Exactly. And I mean, that's definitely the American experience, quite contrary to what people assume the American experience would be. But in terms of, since we were talking about food, I'm just wondering, like, what does Hmong cuisine really look like? What are some of the maybe like staple dishes for the cuisine?
Yeah, we have so many amazing chefs that are really sprouting up in the Hmong community. And I want to say, especially in the Twin Cities, we have James Beard finalists up there who have opened restaurants in the last, just both of them, actually in the last like year and a half, 2 years now. So it's really beautiful to watch this evolution of our food. And I think a lot of people can talk about it because these chefs are my friends, and they say, we get a lot of pushback from the Hmong community because they say it's not Hmong enough. And then we're also opening the palates of other people who aren't Hmong by, creating the dishes that we're creating. And so I think that we have to like really accept that there's like an evolution of food happening with our culture too. But because what our parents made when I was growing up going to school, and parents just made like stir fry, or she made boiled chicken soup, these chefs are now changing it. They're throwing their own flair in there, which has happened historically as a people, right? We've come from southern China, what is now southern China. We've moved into Southeast Asia. We've taken a lot of flavors from Southeast Asia as we came to the United States. And now here in the United States, we're doing a bunch of different things. Like my friend who is a chef in the Twin Cities, he does like a Hmong burger. And burgers were not a thing that we had in Southeast Asia, but also those flavors in Southeast Asia were not things that we had when we were in the southern part of China. And so it's things like boiled chicken soup. It's things like congee. It's things like let's see, it's things like bitter like sour root soups. It's things like roasted pork, right? It's always that with rice, and then you always have a side of pepper. There's a hot pepper side, and that is almost like, I describe it to other people as like, when you have a person of like Spanish descent and they like to do salsas, and there's all different kinds of salsas. Hmong people also have peppers that are all kinds of peppers. So you just kind of make your pepper the way you like it. And that comes with, serrano peppers. It comes with cilantro as well. I like mine with peppers, cilantro, fish sauce, lime, and I just kind of mix it all up. And that's my pepper. Other people just like no cilantro. They just like the straight pepper and salt, and that's it. Other people just like the pepper, salt, and fish sauce. So it all kind of depends, but that's always like a staple of our cuisine is the Hmong pepper.
Wow. I love how you were mentioning how, what it means to have like Hmong cuisine is also changing over time, because that's literally, the whole cultural experience and how identities are formed, and they just keep on evolving. And it's just so nice to hear about, even just getting like a glimpse of like how colorful the cuisine is. And I think in terms of like Hmong-American experience, most people would still say it's a relatively underrepresented experience in mainstream media. And you yourself are the first Hmong-American TV anchor in a major news market and in the US. So were there ever moments for you growing up where you felt seen or particularly not seen, and how did those moments come together to form how you see yourself and your identity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do share these stories a lot when I talk to especially the younger people, because I do feel that when you're here in the US, and you go to school and you learn English, and at that time when I was growing up, there weren't language immersion schools. There weren't like Mandarin immersion schools or Hmong charter schools like they have in the Twin Cities now, or they have some here in the Sacramento area too. So I was just learning English, but my first language, my native tongue, is Hmong. And so my parents taught me that language first. And so English is actually my second language. And I think growing up, it was almost like, okay, I didn't really quite know where I fit. And I think that a lot of people can relate to this kind of, where do I fit? And I remember, and I was just telling the story yesterday to a friend of mine who is Southeast Asian, because she grew up here in the Bay Area, and we were talking about our differences growing up, but how alone we felt because she is Lao and I am Hmong, and a lot of people don't really know what those cultures and cultures and heritages really are. And I was saying, when I grew up in Sacramento, while there were other Hmong people around, I wanted to do things like I wanted to play soccer and I wanted to play basketball, and I did. But I would be on the team with other people who were perhaps white. And I remember there was a white soccer friend of mine who her dad would take us to all the different, soccer games. Like he was our ride, our transport. And there was one day where I went over to her house because he said, we have time. Why don't we stop by the house? And Emily was like, okay. And so we went to her house and we drove up to this beautiful, like it was almost like a cottage looking home in this beautiful neighborhood of Sacramento. And we walked inside their home and I was just like, everything was like immaculate. And then we walk up to her room and her room is all pink. And I was just thinking like, wow. And there were moments where I felt that if I was white, this world would be so much easier for me. Like things would just come easier to me. Nobody would question, anything because I was in that skin. So there were moments like that where I was younger and I really thought that. And I thought that was the right way to be. And then I think because you're in this world that sends all these different messages to us saying that is the right way, especially as for me and a person my age, you start to believe that. And so it was really hard, I think, untangling all of that once I realized like that's not who I want to be. But it wasn't until my adult years that I started to really think about my identity as a Hmong person and as a Hmong woman and as an Asian American. And yeah, it took a lot of undoing. And especially I would say in this industry too, it took a lot of undoing and unlearning. And it's still happening today, and it's still happening.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like even for a lot of guests that we feature on Proudly Asian, they also did not start off being very proudly Asian. And I think that sort of kind of reflects, a little bit of that like third culture Asian experience around the world, be it America, in Europe, those who grew up in Africa. Like we kind of grew up not really understanding what it means to be Asian, or like it's actually normal to be Asian, like it's as if like from what we're hearing growing up, we would always kind of get told that, well, there's something wrong with being Asian, or at least you don't see that very much in mainstream media. So it's definitely a journey becoming proudly Asian. And it's just amazing to see, like people like yourself, now you're showing up in a major news market in the States. People are seeing you on TV and the work that you're doing. And I just can't wait to see how, like what it means to be Asian continues to change over time with the work that you are putting in. And since now we're talking about your work, I am also keen to sort of like talk about your journalism career. I'm just wondering, like, how did you even begin your journalism career? Did you know that's always something that you wanted to do, or was it an accident?
It was maybe both. I think that I did not like math or science. I was not very good at it, and I just knew that I would never be successful in any respect in those industries. So that was one. And I loved my English classes. I just thought they were so fun and creative, and I just loved writing, and I loved, going out and getting assigned something from our teacher and then putting ideas to a page. So I really enjoyed the writing process. And I always tell people, I would have rather written a 10-page paper than done a multiple choice exam. Like that's how I was. So I always enjoyed that throughout high school. And I think coming from the Hmong community and also a family that was very, very poor growing up, like my parents were on government assistance my whole life. And so when I went to college, and at that point, I was the third person in my family to go to college. My parents, because they're also very frugal, they were worried about me wasting money by going to college if I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I had to pick a major stat. And so I think I just thought about, okay, what kinds of things do I like? What do I don't like? Well, I know I really enjoy my English classes, so let's go with something related to that. And so I picked journalism, and I have to tell you, this is the accidental part. I didn't really know what journalism was at that point. All I knew was that it entailed writing and it may be talking to people, and I really enjoyed that. And so I got into journalism and I got into the programs, and it wasn't until maybe my sophomore year, like towards the end of my sophomore year, that I started taking my journalism classes after our general courses. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting and it's really cool and fun. And I get to go out and meet people and talk to them about their issues or talk to them about something really wonderful happening in their lives. And at that point, I had needed something else. I needed something to really motivate me and also help guide me, because my family wasn't going to guide me. Nobody in my family really even knew what journalism was at that time either. And they were kind of like, okay, whatever, if that's what you want to do, sure. And so I sought out, and I don't know why I did this, but I sought out the Asian American Journalists Association. And I got really, really, really lucky because I am from Sacramento, and the Sacramento chapter of the Asian American Journalists Association, AAJA, is so majorly robust. And they had all this programming for students, and it was like you could go and bring your articles or your resume reels, as we would call them back then, to these journalists, professional journalists who are already working in the industry, and they can read it through and they can give you tips. And they were doing all this kind of programming for Asian journalist. And I thought it was so cool. And it would put me into the rooms with people like my mentors who now I work in the same market as them, which I think is like wild and also really lovely. But people like Ryan Yamamoto or Suzanne Fawn, it put me into rooms with them. And they would say, okay, this is what you probably want to do with your resume reel. And they would kind of just chop it all up. And I loved it. And so I took their advice. And AAJA also has a convention every year in a different city. And I remember my first convention was in Miami, Florida. And it was an incredible experience. And I loved it. And at that point, I hadn't really traveled that much. I mean, I was only in maybe my second or third year of college. And so up until that point, I haven't really traveled much. Like my parents were very poor growing up, so we didn't travel anywhere. We'd probably like drive down to maybe a park or something, like Yosemite or something, because that was close by. But we never flew anywhere. And so AAJA really opened my eyes in that way of like just how big the world is. And then I think the pivotal moment that changed was when I went to convention in Chicago. And back then, there used to be something called Unity. Unity was all the different journalists of color coming together to one big major event. It was every 4 years. It was always during an election year. And that year was 2008, I want to say, because Barack Obama was a candidate for president. And all the candidates would typically try to come to Unity because it was so massive. And so Barack Obama was there that year. I missed him because I had to fly home. But Chicago really opened my eyes. And I want to say it opened my eyes to, I was so stuck in this little world of just being like, well, I'm just a Hmong girl from Sacramento and, with maybe dreams that don't live outside of Sacramento. And then I realized, no, there's this whole giant world out there that I could explore and I want to explore. And AAJA really gave that to me, being around all these people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And I think that really is a pivotal moment for me. That kind of really changed the trajectory of my life. And I say that not jokingly because also up until that point, I mean, I was so also stuck in my Hmong world. I was dating a Hmong guy for about 7-8 years at that point. And mind you, I'm only like my sophomore year college. So I had been dating him since I was like 14. And it really opened my eyes because I came back and I was like, what am I doing in this relationship? This relationship is awful. And I need to get out of this because I want so much more for my life. And there's this whole identity of being like a Hmong daughter-in-law, like a good Hmong daughter-in-law. There's this whole saying, right? Like everyone wants to be a good Hmong daughter-in-law. She's obedient, she cleans, she cooks, she's just wonderful to be around. She's always positive. And I knew in my gut and in my being that I was never going to be this, quote, good Hmong daughter-in-law because I wanted more for myself. And so I just knew that I had to get out of this relationship. And so after AAJA, after the convention. So I think like that is also very real because people can be stuck in their cultural beliefs and traditions and pressures and that can really keep you stagnant. But I had to really listen to myself. And so that's why I think, AAJA was really pivotal for me. But, then getting into the industry, we could talk about how that itself was a whole undoing of, trying to be someone who was perfect on TV and spoke perfect English and just didn't show her Asian. I tried not to show her Asian identity other than how she physically looked outside in any other way. But yeah.
Wow. I mean, shout out to the AAJA. I mean, I can totally relate that to that experience that you mentioned. Because I myself was involved in some work for the AAJA Asia chapter out of Hong Kong. And when I first attended a national conference that was in Texas. That was Texas.
Yeah.
And I could totally relate to how, like you mentioned, they had this very robust programming.
Mm-hmm.
I remember attending that CNN reporter workshop, and I just learned so much out of it. And this is such a great community. So, I mean, like, we just need to take a moment to give AAJA big shout out during this episode. And I mean, for you, so that was definitely the pivotal moment where you decided you had to change personally and professionally. And was it, I mean, what was the journey like for you to land your first journalist job? Like, was it in broadcast or in print?
Yeah, it was in broadcast, and I had graduated in December. So it was like 4.5 years of college. I graduated in December, and I was dating a guy who was formerly in the industry, but he had gotten out. And he was like, all right, you should start sending your stuff out. And I was like, yeah, I know. So I started sending my stuff out, like always a procrastinator, 2 weeks before I graduated. And me and this guy went down to San Diego just to kind of be like, oh, this is great. Like, it was almost New Year's and we were spending New Year's in San Diego. And I thought, I'm surely not going to hear back until, maybe a couple months later, because that was for everyone. It's so different. You could hear back right away. You could maybe hear back like 4 months, 5 months, 6 months later. And so I didn't know what the timeline was going to be. I didn't know how good my actual, resume reel was. A resume reel is just like you're reporting stand-ups, you're anchoring at the desk or something. Just put it all together on a visual like tape at that point. I think ours was on DVDs back then, but we still call them reels. So I sent them all out and I was like, all right, we'll see. And it was mostly to California, like small markets, like Salinas, Redding. Then I went up north to like the Tri-Cities. So that was like in Washington. And then I sent one to Texas, I think, just because I was like, I don't know, maybe. So I was kind of trying to keep it like mostly West Coast, but then I sent one to Texas. So anyways, I was in San Diego and I remember we were eating carne asada fries at a restaurant there. And I got a phone call and it said Eugene, Oregon. And I was like, what is this? And so I picked it up because I knew that I had sent something to Eugene. And I was like, maybe it's a news director. Who knows? And it was. And his name was Gary. And he said, hey, I saw your newsreel and I really liked it. I wanted to chat with you. And I was like, oh my God. So I took the call. And after that call, he kind of just offered me the job. It wasn't like it. I mean, these are small markets, and I think news directors understand that the turnover is very quick in these small markets. They're just trying to get someone to come in and fill, and they're not trying to fly you out to see if you like the place, and they're not doing all that. That comes later in your career if you continue with journalism. But so he kind of offered me the job at the end, and I was like, whoa! And so I took it. I took it because he seemed like decent enough. I looked up the station, and I was like, okay, yeah. And so that's how I fell into my first job in Oregon. And I feel really lucky because I know it does take some time for some people to get their first gig. But I will say arriving there was a huge, massive learning curve. Like it was so hard for me the first 6 months. It's always different when you're interning and getting time to put something together. And then when you're actually in the position and you have deadlines, daily deadlines, you're like, oh crap, like how am I gonna do this? And you have to learn editing, and all of that was like really, really a difficult thing for me. And then also I was kind of careless. So I would like break things. I would break like cameras, or I'd break a lens or something. And I was like really, really careless because I was always so worried about getting there on time. So things like that really did happen, and I would get written up. And I thought like for sure I was going to get fired or something, and I'd have to move back to Sacramento. And so there were moments where I would just like, after a long, hard day, I would just literally shut my blinds and just cry and be like, am I doing the right thing? And then I don't know what it was, but I just kept trying and I kept trying, and I came out of that and I was like, oh, I think I'm like decent at this now. I think I got it. And I think that's why first markets are so important, is because you really cut your teeth into this thing called journalism, and you're really trying, and you make so many bad, awful mistakes. And yeah, it was my little mountain to climb, and I did. And then from there, I've moved all over the country. I mean, I was in Kansas City, I was in Arizona, I was in Minnesota, I was in Fresno. I am here now in the Bay Area, and it's just been a really beautiful unfolding journey for me. And I think exactly the way it needed to happen, because as I mentioned earlier, Isabel, there was like so many, there were so many things that I thought I was supposed to do when I got into the industry and supposed to look like, supposed to say or not say. And so that was also a journey.
Wow. I couldn't imagine how you overcome all those challenges in your first job, because especially you were also navigating a new city, probably like you had to move for the job as well.
Yeah.
Right.
But culture shock for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Culture shock, because I grew up in Sacramento, which is super diverse. And then I moved to Eugene, Oregon, which is like, I think at that point, the Asian American or the Asian population was like lower than 2%. And a lot of them were foreign exchange students at the university. And so there was not a lot of like Asians in Eugene. And I remember just being like, oh my God, I just didn't know that this was what the world was outside of, my little bubble in California. And so even that was like a culture shock. And then, when you called people and they would be like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Or like I would get there and they'd be like, oh, you're the reporter. Oh, and I would hear them. I heard this one guy one time shut the door, and then he yelled to his partner, there's an Asian reporter at the door. Like, it was also for them something new. Like, they never experienced an Asian reporter in these parts of Oregon before. And so I think it was really a learning experience for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, just as a follow-up, I'm just wondering, like, throughout your career as a journalist, like, did you ever encounter any, like, for example, like real challenges, just because of your cultural identity, because of who you are?
Yeah. Yeah, there were many, many moments. Where do I start?
I can imagine.
The personal challenges were that I thought that I needed to fit into this box. And I needed to be, this is what an anchor and a reporter looks like and sounds like. And so there were things that I did, like the clothes that I wore that didn't really reflect who I was. It just reflected what I thought an anchor should look like. And losing like my first language, like losing my ability to find words in Hmong, like that was huge for me too. And my dad would call me and he'd be like, you should just listen to Hmong songs or watch Hmong videos, just to make sure that you're keeping up on that, because there's no one Hmong there for you to speak with. And I was like, okay, whatever, and then I would kind of just like let it go. And then it wasn't until like later on, it was always there nagging at me, being like, hey, remember that you're still Hmong? It was always nagging at me, but I just kind of like almost like suppressed it because I wanted to be what quote unquote successful in this industry, whatever that looked like. And so it was almost like play by the rules, Gia. If you show too much of your Asianness, you might not, get a job, or you might be like too Asian for this company, this station, or whatever. And so there were moments like that. But then, that was my personal journey that I then had to unlearn. And there was like a moment where my dad had written me a Facebook note that I still have, and it pops up every year. And he had written me when I was in Eugene, Oregon. And he said, because my dad is a really proud Hmong person. He is so proud of who we are. And I get that a lot from him too. But he wrote, you should, in Hmong, he wrote, you should make sure that when you see Hmong people, that you say hello to them and talk to them, because that's who you are first. And I didn't really think much of it, but now as I've gotten older and that pops up, I'm always like, wow, I understand what he was trying to tell me. And I really cherish that note now. And so it really was a learning journey for me. But then in terms of like, the stations themselves, we always talk about this in our industry is, it's almost like 2 Asians are too many at the station. You have to have only one. You have to have your one Asian reporter. And that's really what it was. I remember leaving Kansas City, Missouri, and I was the only Asian person on air at our station. And I left that station, and all my friends text me like 3 weeks later, and they're like, we hired Gia 2.0, and they hired another Asian woman in my place. And that's real. It happens all the time, because you're like, well, our Asian reporter left, so we got to hire another Asian person. And that happens. That happens. Or you're applying for a job and you're very, very well qualified for it. And I'll be like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this has never been said to me, but executives have told me that these are the conversations they're having behind the scenes. They're like, I don't know. We already have our Asian anchor. So we can't have two Asian anchors. That's going to be like too much. And so I think for me and Michelle Lee, our co-founder of the Very Asian Foundation, these are very real conversations that happen all the time in our industries. And we are really trying to say the world is becoming so much more mixed and we need diverse newsrooms. We need it. The example of being in this newsroom currently and no one fighting for these Fall of Saigon stories, the 50th anniversary. And there's a huge population in San Jose, in the Bay Area. In San Jose, it has the largest Vietnamese population outside of any city outside of Vietnam. And for me, that's huge. Not only am I Southeast Asian, but I also understand that these stories that we cover need to be reflected in our coverage. And so fighting for those stories. But my news director, this was not on her radar at all. And to her credit, when I told her about it, again, I had been telling her for 6 months, but I think she was kind of like, okay, we'll wait until it actually gets here. But to her credit, she's like, oh my God, why haven't we done anything? Yes, go. But it also takes people fighting for that in your newsroom, because otherwise, if I didn't say anything, there would have been no coverage of this, no 30-minute special that's airing. And so I think there are also those issues that we're still dealing with today of news directors that just don't get it, general managers that just don't get it. I had a general manager at one station. We were in a diversity training, and the general manager, they had just talked about the word implicit bias, the words implicit bias, and the definition of what implicit bias is. And our general manager kind of chimed in and he said, I don't understand. I mean, when I see Gia, I just see her as a reporter. And not even understanding his own implicit bias. And so for us, it's still a work in progress, and it always is going to be, I think. I really hope that it's less so as we move forward, and I'm hopeful about that. But we still have these ideas that are just maybe too abstract sometimes for other people to really understand. But if you walk in our bodies, you really get, like we all have implicit biases.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it just sounds like a white person saying like, oh, what racism? I never encountered that, because they have never lived a life as a person from an underrepresented community. And I'm just so glad that you and Michelle together are kind of like flipping the script of what it means to be very Asian. Like it's actually a positive thing to be very Asian. But I mean, of course, as we hope that, these efforts are going to continue, like the perception and the overall experience of the AAPI community. Of course, we know that this year with the new US administration, D&I efforts are definitely facing a new wave of headwinds, with the removal of the US government's D&I programs and preferencing corporations are walking back on some of the D&I efforts. So, what's really happening on the ground in the US? What's the current stage of play for the AAPI community? What are people talking about these days?
Yeah, I think in talking to folks, I really sense fear. And I think that's what this administration wants, is to make people afraid of being who they truly are and coming to the table authentically. I mean, we also know that this administration has gotten rid of the White House initiative on AANHPIs, which was and had been a community group appointed by the president even in the Republican years. So this administration has said no longer. So that has really been devastating, I think, to a lot of the AANHPI community here in the U.S. because that group we felt seen by, and so I think there's also just so much uprootingness of what's happening, right? Like we're on a little shaky ground, and the president himself has said, this is what it takes to create change. And so I think the shakiness is making people feel a little wobbly. And I think the fear that they may be targeted because he is the president's administration and the president himself. He is coming after media organizations. He's coming after universities. He's coming after anyone who does not align with his administration goals. So, we've had things happen here where, I was supposed to perhaps talk to a university and give a talk about my own experience as an Asian American person. And this university said, you know what, let's hold off on that right now. And so and they didn't say exactly why, except that they were going to focus on their students right now, which if you read between the lines, it was just they don't want to be under scrutiny with this administration because they really rely on the federal dollars. And so I think there's a lot of just fear, confusion. Let's wait and see. Let's not ruffle any feathers right now because our funding could be cut. There are even refugee community organizations here on the ground in the Bay Area whom I've talked to, and they have mentioned that there's a lot going on, but they cannot talk to us right now because they do not want to be targets. And so if we could just monitor the situation with them. And so I think that what the administration has wanted is really working. But I think the question really is, are we just going to pretend that these things aren't happening until there's a new administration on board? Or because all these things that these organizations, these universities, these goals that they're working towards, this more equitable and inclusive community, it's still happening. We still have the discrepancies out there when it comes to equity, right? And so I just wonder what's going to happen next. I really think that there's been, we heard now Harvard and Stanford saying, no, we are private universities, that we do not need to follow what the administration wants us to do. And so I think we're kind of seeing cracks, but this administration came in fast and hard. This is his second and last administration because presidents can only have 2 terms. And so I think that they're coming in fast and hard because they want to make the changes quickly. But it's going to take a lot of undoing to whoever then goes into office next and realizes that a lot of Americans disapprove of this. We have polling now that President Trump's ratings are very, very low. And also that his rating, especially on the economy now, is very low. And whereas that was one of the highlights of his Trump's presidency prior and also throughout the campaign. But now with the tariffs in play, it's really kind of making people nervous and people who were also originally in Trump's boat.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, while it's still sort of kind of like a wait and see in terms of the longer term impact of these D&I rollbacks, from your point of view, what do you think we are risking to lose when these systems that have been supporting D&I, whether it's in corporation and private sector or government, like when they start to disappear, what are we losing?
I think what we're losing is voices and perspectives that really give the fabric of this community and this country a robust outlook. I really do think that we're better because we have a lot of ideas. And I say that also on both sides, right? Because I also know that half the country voted for Trump. And so I say that on both sides. I say that we on both sides need to have an open, honest conversation that is respectful, because I think that we've lost so much respect in this country for each other. And it's been so polarized. And some people will say, well, yes, that's also from President Trump. That's also from the Trump administration. And for me, there's also a choice. There's also a choice. You don't have to be the way that the president is, his character, it feels like very abrasive, right? He's very abrasive, very direct, very to the point. If he doesn't like something, he'll tell you. And we don't have to take that from the top down, but the top down is very powerful structure. And I say that because I know that in my community, in the Hmong community, and also within my own family, there are Trump supporters. And I want to understand where they're coming from, but not at a place where I just shut them down. So I think that we are losing more robust and also just conversations in which we can probably find common ground, but we're not having those conversations because we're so long been like, okay, I'm just going to mic drop everyone around here and then walk away. And we're not actually having the back and forth conversations that we used to have. And so I think I'm really trying hard, even within my own family, relatives, to be open to why they're feeling that way and try to understand where they're coming from and try to understand, okay, we kind of want the same things. We just think that there's a different way to go about getting there. And so, yeah, I think that is also an issue too right now in our country is we're not having those conversations. We're just saying, absolutely, we're putting walls up. I mean, to play on the administration's words, we're putting walls up between people, just saying, I don't want to be friends with them because they think this way. I don't want to, that family member voted for Trump. That family member voted for Biden. I cannot talk to them, And so I think that's really a struggle right now with the climate and the culture that has really been created from the top down.
Absolutely, yeah. Even having that opportunity to disagree with each other, trying to understand, just say, I disagree with you, but I would like to know where you're coming from, instead of now, having that whole trend and tendency of building their own echo chambers, which is very dangerous. Yeah, definitely. I agree with what you just said there. And, like wearing the hat, as the co-founder of Very Asian Foundation, I'm just wondering if you have any upcoming initiatives or like how you're going to approach this whole new context for the AAPI community in the States.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're just going to continue to do the work that we do because that's the work. The work is still necessary and it's still needed no matter what message is coming out from the White House, right? We still believe that youth in schools where they spend most of their days should be seen in their school libraries. So that's why we do the Neighbook Project and we put books written by AANHPI people or characters and protagonists with AANHPIs in their books. We put those in school libraries because we still believe that that's important for these youth to see. And we know that because we've done surveys and these youth tell us that the feeling of belonging is so strong for them when they read these books and they see themselves reflected in these books. And we also know that because of the way the Neighbook Project started. It started because of high school students who came to us and said, we are not seeing ourselves in our school libraries. And it was in a district in St. Louis. And they said, what can you guys do about it? And we said, we can help you guys create a book list with scholars and educators and people who study this. And let's try to diversify the titles there. And when we did that, a lot of them did tell us and shared with us courageously that they were self-harming because they didn't see themselves reflected. So this is really a mental health issue too for our youth. It's not just, okay, let's make it, more diversified in these school libraries. It's like, no, let's make it so these students can see themselves reflected and they don't harm themselves because of it. And so I think that's also a really important piece that we're just going to continue to do. We're not going to shy away from the issues that we've been working on because we know that there's still issues, no matter how many people want to say, we're taking a pause on this. I think we're still going head forward into all the programming that we're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like with this new wave of challenges, perhaps it just reinforces the importance of the work that you are doing there. So thank you so much to you and Michelle for continuing with this mission, no matter what. And now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Fires. Now, in this segment, I'm going to ask my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life. So, Gia, are you ready for all the questions that are coming your way?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right, let's get started. The first question is, oh, you're Gia.
Yes, that one comes from my years of reporting and anchoring, and people not realizing when I've called them for a job or like an assignment that I was assigned to, a story, and I'm talking to them over the phone and I say, okay, well, I'm Gia, and then I go and meet them. And then they go, oh, you're Gia? Well, you're Gia. I'm like, yeah. And you kind of, nobody says it, but you know what they're meaning by that. And I've been told, you sound very white over the phone. If I didn't see you, you would be like a white person. And yeah, that's just what I've gotten. And my thought is like, okay, well, I'm not. I'm Asian. And this is how I talk. That's my response. If I could just be frank with them.
Yes, it's almost like they're basically just asking, like, why is your English so good? Like when they meet you. And
exactly.
The next question is, well, you'll be fine because you probably know martial arts, right?
Yeah, isn't that wild? I really got that one time. It was so insane. I was here in the Bay Area. I was working here in the Bay Area. And I was at a university and I needed to walk to my car, and it was maybe like 9 o'clock at night. And so it was very dark. And the person said to me, but you're going to be fine because you probably know martial arts, right? And I just looked at him and I was like, And I didn't say anything to him because it was a work event. I didn't want to create a brouhaha, which is also another thing that Asian people have to do. Is like, we do mental gymnastics just to, is this worth it? Is it not worth it? What are we going to do in this situation? And I was like, this is not worth it. This guy's not going to understand. If he made that comment, I'm not going to try to educate him right now and spend my energy doing that. And so I just walked away. But I think, in this case, it would be really hysterical if he said that to me and I faked a move on him. And it scared him. That would have been hilarious, I think.
Yes. That would be yes. And for the third question, you're probably one of those Hmong women that marry other races.
Yeah, I get that a lot, and also even not just Hmong, but Asian women that marry another race. And they're mostly meaning white. Which is funny because, yes, I am dating a white man. But I will say that it's not because of this, like, whatever white adjacent identity that some say that Asian people want. I mean, I've dated the colors of the rainbow, but I just landed on this person who's really wonderful. And so when they do see me with him, it is very, there's a lot of judgment right away. And I think that we could, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier, I think if I could talk to them, I would want to say, you should afford this person the same respect and space as you want afforded to yourself. So I would just like people to be a little bit more open. My route has never been white men. It's been everything. I've dated a Hmong guy. I've dated Asian men. I've dated Black men. I've dated everything. And so I think that, I think I would say that is, we need to afford each other the space. We didn't ask to be born in this body. This person didn't ask to be born in that body. And they're wonderful. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just annoying, like, whenever you show up with your partner, then people would have that kind of feels like, oh yeah, of course you are. But also, like, just now you mentioned how, kind of your dating history, right? Like, you shouldn't even have to justify your personal choices. So it's just, this bias has to go. And
agreed.
Next one, well, you smell like fish.
Yeah, I really got that in Arizona once. And it came out of nowhere. I was really hurt by it when it happened. I can talk about it now, but at the moment I was really hurt by it because I was really confused. I was walking out of a mall and these guys seemed a little drunk. I don't know. And I smiled and then they were walking next to me and they were just like making fun of me for going shopping or something on a day. It was a beautiful day. I was there for a wedding in Arizona. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I think weird, but I'm not going to do anything. And so then they kept going at it. And so then I did say something and they didn't like that I said something. And so as they walked away, they said, "You smell like fish." And I was so shocked by that. Like, it really shocked my system. Like, I started shaking. I didn't know what to do. Like, that's what racism can do to you if you've never experienced it, like, so bluntly like that. And even, like, indirectly, I would say, like, that's what it can do to you is, like, it just shocks your system because you have no idea. Like, you didn't do anything to these people. Why would they say that? And now, I think I would just say, F you. Walk away.
That's what they deserve.
Yeah. And I didn't say that in that moment. And that's okay. I was still, processing what was happening. But today, if that would happen, I think I would just say, F you.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Gia, in Rapid Bias, I just think our Asian reporters should be covering our Asian stories.
Yeah. Okay. I really got that. And I got that recently here in the Bay Area. And I was so livid about that. Because again, it's almost like you have to justify the stories that you've done and how you've been in the community and how you've worked with the community, both in my job and in my nonprofit world, right? Like all my different hats that I wear. And I was so upset about that. And I said, we need to have a conversation. So I did what I actually wanted to do, was actually brought him to the table and I had a conversation with him. And I said, I want you to know that I'm not an Asian reporter. I'm a reporter who happens to be Asian. And he kind of was like, oh yeah, I hear you. But, I think in that instance, I did what I wanted to do, is just bring him to the table and say, this is why. But then I don't want to feel like I have to justify everything else that I've already done in the community and for who I am. So, I think that now that we're into this world where there are a lot of hyper-focused groups on AANHPI issues, and especially after anti-Asian hate, there have been a lot of nonprofits that have popped up focused on that. And I think that now they're seeking their reporters who are Asian to do those stories and cover their issues because it should matter to them too. And it does matter to me. And also, I am not your token Asian reporter. I'm a reporter who happens to be Asian. And so I will do with this issue that you bring to me what I do with any other stories. I will vet it. I will look at it. I will call people. I will get information. And I will decide then if I want to pursue this or not. And so that's what I would do for any story if it happens to involve Asian people or not.
Yes, you are a professional journalist and you have the ability to cover any stories, not just Asian stories. But of course, there's that element of like Asian stories should also be approached with care, with the understanding of like nuanced context, which any professional journalist should be able to unpack. So thank you so much for highlighting all the biases that you encountered at some point in life.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And now here's the fun part for us to wrap up the episode. I'm going to ask you for your music pick for our collective Proudly Asian playlist on Spotify, which we invite our guests and also our listeners from around the world to contribute their picks. So what's your pick, Gia?
Okay, I'm so excited about this. I looked this up before we chatted. I want to highlight Kalia Universe, who actually goes by a different name now, but this is when she was still Kalia Universe. Her song is called Pretty Hearted Girl. And she is a Hmong-American singer and R&B, and she's just wonderful, and I love her, and I really wish her well in her next chapter as she embarks on her new chapter of music making and also her spirituality.
Nice. I'm excited to check it out. And we're going to include the link to the playlist so our listeners can also check it out when this episode goes live. And Gia, finally, I have one last question for you. To you personally, what does it mean to be proudly Hmong-American?
Thanks for that question. I was really thinking hard on this one because it's a big question. I think that what it means to me is there are moments, I think, for a lot of people where they say, okay, there's these things that I don't know. No culture is perfect. There are things that I don't want to keep in my culture and the things that I do. And I think for the things that I do, when I see our community coming together in a beautiful way that really feels like what community means and is defined as, that makes me proud. We have historically taken care of each other in ways that have really been beautiful. And there are examples of that from, women teaching each other how to make these like little story cloths back there that I have hung up in my home here, or to care for their families and care for their other relatives. And I think the mutual aid, the mutual connectedness that we all feel towards each other, that makes me proud to be proudly Hmong, proudly Asian.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your take on, what it means to be proudly Hmong-American with all of our listeners around the world. Gia, thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Isabel, thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.